Breakups aren't hard when you've got a library card. Buckle up because this is a long one. This story covers a few years, but I'll try to keep it concise. Back in 2015, a 25-year-old male was swiping on the apps and matched with someone, a 28-year-old female named Ash, not bothering with a fake name because I'd gaff if she sees this. We went out a couple times and found we had a lot of chemistry. Things got real physical real quick and seemed to be going well for a couple months. One night after we'd gone to a strip club together and fluffed in my car, I dropped her off at home. Later that night, she started sending some sex that had just a weird energy. Something felt off. Then she said something to the effect of what if I was with someone else right now. Thinking this was some sexy hypothetical, I played along, but then I get a nude of her that was clearly taken by someone else. I ask her who she's with and she said her roommate's BF. I got so upset I threw up. I was furious and devastated. Despite that, we met up a week or two later. I forgave her way too easily and she moved out of her apartment and into her mom's basement. Not long after that, things were back to normal and fun. Then she decided she needed to get sober and enter recovery, which I was super supportive of. I drove her to meetings when I could, hung out with her when she wanted, and gave her space when she wanted. Early sobriety is a super volatile state to be in, but I did my best to be a good partner to her. Eventually, we made it work. For a while, I felt that at that point we'd been together long enough that I wanted to introduce her to my family. We had a big dinner planned at my sister's house, but the night of she went totally radio silent on me. Never showed no responses when I checked in on her. I was a wreck for the next few days, barely being able to eat, sleep, or do anything besides worry and spiral. After several days of this, I went to her workplace a little while before she got out and waited in the parking lot. She eventually came out and I was just relieved that she was okay. I asked what happened and she told me that she'd had a bad relapse and even tried to overdose. I was as understanding and supportive as I could be. Later that night, she broke up with me over text. A few weeks went by and we started talking again, followed pretty quickly by us getting back together, and things were fine for a while. Over the course of that first year, the pattern typically went as such. We were fine and dandy, having lots of fun, then she'd disappear for days, weeks at a time. I'd be a nervous wreck, then she'd come back and things were cool, then she'd randomly break up with me, only for us to rekindle and get back together. Unsurprisingly, this took a toll on my mental health, and after a little over a year, I ended things with her for good at the time. What followed was a period of time she and I would later refer to as the in-between. It basically went like this. I was sad for a year, then I was in a stable relationship with someone who actually treated me well for a year, then I was slutty for a year. During that slutty period, circa 2018, I had a career opportunity that put me on the other side of the country from her, so I felt safe reaching out. I asked if she was interested in being old-school pen pals, which she was. We sent letters back and forth during my time away from home, and it was pleasant. We got caught up on each other's lives, and she told me that she was not only single but had been celibate for a while. I should also mention a third figure in this saga. The first year we were dating, I'd periodically hear about her ex Harlow. Just the occasional mention of how he was a loser junkie couldn't let go, just enough to know he was her shitty ex. Anyway, she'd told me that she and Harlow had gotten back together for a while in the in-between, but he left her after he found some diary entries she'd written about me. Well, the months passed, and eventually I moved back home, but with the intention of making it back to the other side of the country permanently. Ash and I exchanged a couple more letters and even met up a couple times to get coffee and catch a movie. All surface level and friendly, but with about a metric fuckton of sexual tension. It didn't take long for me to make the move I wanted and bid my hometown goodbye for reals. It just so happened that Ash had a conference coming up in the city I moved to not long after I'd moved in, so we agreed to meet up while she was out that way. That day finally came, early 2019 at this point, and we decided we'd take a little hike despite the fact that it was raining. A little while into our hike, we took a break and sat for a bit. She then told me how sorry she was for how she'd treated me in the past, how much she'd grown and worked on herself in these 3 years, and how she'd never been able to stop thinking about me. I told her I hadn't stopped thinking about her either. We kissed and then hightailed it back to my apartment to do 3 years worth of fluffing in a single afternoon. Then I drove her back to the airport. We decided to get officially back together despite the distance. She flew out to visit me for longer stretches a few times after that, and it really seemed like she'd changed. For the first few months anyway. Some old patterns started to re-emerge, and it wasn't long before we were back to periodic disappearances and short-lived breakups. This got compounded by both the distance and eventually COVID lockdowns. Since we were so far apart, whenever she'd disappear, all I could do was wait and spiral, often leading to obsessive social media rabbit holes. I should also mention the social media weirdness. It was fine for us to follow each other on Instagram, but she refused to let us be Facebook friends. Whenever I'd try to ask why this was, she'd disappear, so I made excuses for her in my head and just tried to be grateful for what I had. Anywho, these rabbit holes never lead to much besides a couple cryptic clues that felt like grasping at straws. Then she'd finally come back into contact and we'd be fine again. Rinse and repeat. It was in this time frame that we started seriously discussing our future, and she showed a lot of interest in moving out to my new city and moving in with me, and even eventually getting married. During one of her visits, she told me that she'd applied for a PhD program at a school in another state. It came down to either her getting in and moving there for the 2 years the program took, and then moving in with me, or her not getting in and just moving in with me. On the last day of her visit, she told me she got in and I felt a mixed bag. I wasn't thrilled about an extra 2 years of long distance, but I believed the wait would be worth it and I was genuinely happy for her. So it went for a while like that, with lots of exciting ups and devastating downs. She just got worse and my mental health suffered. One of my social media rabbit holes led to the discovery that Harlow had moved to the same small city Ash had just moved to for school. I asked her about it and she said it was because his parents were from there and he had to move back with them. That was also apparently how she'd heard about this school and PhD program. 2021 rolled around and with our new vaccinations, the possibility of travel opened back up. After about a year and a half apart, she booked a flight to come see me for a weekend. No other visits had been that short, but I took what I could get. It was also around this time that it came out that her PhD program was now going to take an extra year. She never bothered to tell me. I had to explicitly ask about it. Another benefit of being vaxxed was I could go out to my favorite karaoke bar again, which I did one night in the summer of 2021 with a friend. He had a circle of friends among the regulars at this bar, and that night I met them. Among them was a lovely woman who I'll call Catherine, fake name. Now I'll admit I'm not always great at social cues, and I'm especially bad at telling the difference between someone flirting with me and just being nice. I've been wrong about both many times in my life. Anyway, Catherine was there the next week too and invited me to a movie that a big group of her friends were going to. We went, had a lovely time, and hung out a couple more times after that. This whole time I was sure she just wanted to be friends, but nope. She confessed her feelings for me, and I told her I wasn't really in a place to date anyone and mentioned I was in a complicated long-distance situation that wasn't making me happy anymore. Honestly, someone being kind to me really opened my eyes to how horribly and arguably abusively I'd been treated by Ash. I realized I needed to cut her off once, and for all regardless of whether Catherine would still give me a chance. I took some time to gather my thoughts and write out a breakup message to Ash detailing all the ways she'd mistreated me. It ended up being novel length and required me to break it up into multiple messages. Felt so cathartic to finally get all of that out, and of course she left it on read. Never heard from her again. Catherine and I dated for a few months after that, and after a bunch of stuff that's not relevant to this story, she broke up with me. I was pretty heartbroken and depressed for a while, which led to a few more rabbit holes. The last one actually led to some real answers, or rather, one answer that explained pretty much everything. I managed to dig up a Facebook post Ash's mom had made back in 2018. It was a post in a public group for some kind of family reunion. An RSVP/primer of sorts for the rest of the family. It went along the lines of I'm XXXXXXXX, daughter of YYYYYYYY and ZZZZZZZZ, and here's my daughter Ash and her husband Harlow. It linked to both of their real Facebook accounts, so there was no mistaking. This post would have been right around the time she and I reconnected and started sending letters to each other, when she explicitly told me she was not in any kind of relationship. Furthermore, I learned that she wasn't in school at all, but it was Harlow that got into the PhD program. Now I had 2 reasons to be devastated, and I did not take it well. Months upon months followed with me isolating in the dark as much as possible and using basically all of my saved up sick time on mental health days. Whenever I had to be at work or around people in general, I'd just kinda power through it and count the seconds until I could be alone again. Eventually, I started seeing a therapist and got referred to a psychiatrist for some mood stabilizers. Okay, now we can finally get to the revenge. Somewhere during this tumultuous time, I remembered that I'd given Ash access to my library card as she was an avid reader, and since we lived in different cities, my library card opened up a wider selection of ebooks and the like for her. I logged into my account one day and saw that she'd been actively using it this whole time. Huge list of holds and reservations covering a wide variety of topics and genres. Inspiration struck, and I waited for the perfect moment to get my extremely petty revenge. I monitored my account until she checked out a fresh book. Drop your verdict in the comments. Wait, what?